If it has to shut down, it'll have to shut down.
At 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday, October 1st, 2025, the US federal government officially ran out of money. The result? The government has shut down for the first time in nearly 7 years. Millions of federal workers are facing an uncertain future, and Americans are left asking the same question. How did this happen? And what happens next? The immediate cause is simple. Both Republican and Democratic proposals to keep the government funded failed the Senate. The deeper story is about political leverage, healthcare policy, and partisan standoffs that leave ordinary Americans caught in the middle. This is the 21st government shutdown since the 1970s. The last one, in 2018 to 2019, lasted 35 days, the longest in US history, and cost billions in lost economic activity. Now, history is repeating itself. Let's break down what you need to know. So why did it happen? The short answer, gridlock in the Senate. Republicans who held 53 seats pushed a clean, continuing resolution, essentially a temporary spending bill that would extend government funding without additional provisions. To pass, they needed 60 votes. That meant they needed Democrats. Democrats, knowing this, refused to back a bill without securing their own demands. Those demands included, first, bringing back the Medicare funding that was earlier cut in the summer. Second, keeping Obamacare tax credits in place so healthcare stays affordable. And third, making sure public health agencies like the CDC and the NIH don't lose more funding, something Democrats say was already slashed under Trump.
Our position has been very clear. Cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save healthcare.
Republicans said Democrats were holding the government hostage over partisan demands. Democrats argued that Republicans would rather shut down the government than fix what they described as a healthcare crisis. The result? A stalemate.
They have taken the American people hostage in a way that they think benefits them politically.
They prioritize taxpayer-funded benefits for illegal aliens over keeping the government open for American citizens.
Republicans have tried to stick us with a partisan CR that fails to protect Americans' health care and does nothing to fix the health care mess that they created.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune accused Democrats of bowing to their far-left base and putting policies over people. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Republicans had failed to address America's biggest healthcare problem and were now blaming Democrats for it. Both sides walked away claiming that the other was responsible. The government shut down as the clock struck midnight.
Senate Democrats have sacrificed the American people to Democrats' partisan interests.
So we see now Republicans are plunging America into a shutdown, rejecting bipartisan talks, pushing a partisan bill, and risking America's health care, worst of all.
President Donald Trump leaned into the confrontation. Before the vote, he warned that if the shutdown happened, he could impose cuts that are irreversible. He openly threatened to lay off a lot of people, targeting federal workers and programs that he said Democrats cared about.
We can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. So they're taking a risk by having a shutdown because of the shutdown, we can do things medically and other ways, including benefits. We can cut large numbers of people out. We don't want to do that, but we don't want fraud, waste, and abuse.
The White House's budget office ordered agencies to prepare for an orderly shutdown. Websites for federal agencies even began carrying political messages blaming Democrats for the crisis. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, for example, put up a bright red banner on its homepage accusing the radical left of shutting down the government. That message drew immediate criticism and even a Hatch Act violation complaint, since federal employees are prohibited from using official resources for partisan policies. Vice President J.D. Vance echoed Trump, saying, "I think we're heading to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing." Democrats countered by accusing Trump of using the shutdown as a political weapon and of threatening ordinary workers as part of a partisan power struggle.
I think we're headed to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing. They had some ideas that the president thought was reasonable. What's not reasonable is to hold those ideas as leverage and to shut down the government unless we give you everything that you want.
If the government shuts down, it's because Republicans have decided to shut the government down and hurt the American people.
Here's what a shutdown actually means in practice. Federal employees, around 4 million people, are directly affected. Some will be furloughed, which means they're told not to report to work and they won't be paid during the shutdown. Others, labelled essential, will still have to show up for their jobs, but won't see a paycheck until the shutdown ends. That group includes TSA agents, air traffic controllers, weather forecasters, and border patrol agents. The military is also impacted. Roughly 2 million active duty and reserve troops will continue working, but their pay could stop if the shutdown drags into mid-October. According to the Pentagon, top priorities will remain securing the southern border, maintaining overseas operations, and advancing President Trump's Golden Dome missile defense project. Contractors face a different situation. Unlike federal employees, contract workers like janitors, cafeteria staff, and security guards are not guaranteed back pay once the shutdown is over. For them, every missed day of work is a missed paycheck with no promise of recovery. Programs and services will also start to feel the squeeze. SNAP, the food stamps program, and WIC, which helps mothers and infants, could begin losing funding if the shutdown goes on longer than a week. National parks and museums may close. The Smithsonian says it has enough money to stay open for about a week before it will have to shut its doors. At the Justice Department, criminal cases will still move forward, but civil litigation could be delayed. Immigration hearings are expected to continue. The Department of Labor will halt its data collection, which means no monthly job report will be released this week. Now, here's what continues despite the shutdown. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicare benefits will still go out. However, some related services like getting a replacement card may slow down. And the Postal Service will keep delivering mail because it is funded separately through its own revenue. For most Americans, the shutdown's impact isn't felt immediately, but as the days turn into weeks, the consequences pile up. Missed paychecks, stalled services, and a growing sense of uncertainty spreading across the country. Shutdowns aren't just a political fight, they're expensive. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that furloughing 750,000 employees costs around $400 million per day. That's money lost in wages, productivity, and economic ripple effects. The 2018-2019 shutdown cost the economy around $3 billion in permanent losses, according to the CBO. Those losses were never recovered, and many workers struggled to pay bills during the standoff. Markets are reacting cautiously this time. The Dow Jones actually closed at a record high the day before the shutdown, but futures dipped on the news. Gold prices surged past $3,800 an ounce, reflecting investor anxiety. The US dollar weakened slightly against other currencies. For now, investors see this as a temporary blip. But the longer the shutdown drags on, the more uncertainty grows, especially if the missed jobs report makes it harder for markets to gauge the health of the economy. Beyond numbers, the human stories are already emerging. TSA officers and air traffic controllers are still showing up for duty, but there's no certainty about when their next paycheck will arrive. In previous shutdowns, that kind of financial stress led to widespread sickouts, which in turn caused serious delays at airports. Federal workers across the country are bracing themselves for furlough notices today. Many of them live paycheck to paycheck, and history shows that in earlier shutdowns, some had no choice but to turn to food banks just to get by. Military families are also under pressure. Nearly 1 in 4 already report facing food insecurity, and if paychecks are delayed, the strain could be severe. The reality is that many of these families have less than $500 in savings, leaving them especially vulnerable to even a short financial disruption. Nutrition programs like the WIC are also at risk. Funding could run dry within a week, which could directly impact millions of women and children who depend on that assistance for groceries and essential health services. In Washington, D.C., local non-profits are preparing for a surge in demand for food assistance. Community leaders say families are fearful not only of losing income, but also of heightened enforcement actions by federal agencies during this political standoff. The politics of a political shutdown are always messy, and this one is no exception. Democrats argue that this fight is about protecting health care. Senator Andy Kim of New Jersey said, "Real lives are at stake tomorrow and in the coming days. Millions of Americans will realize that their health care is going to go through the roof." He said Republicans had shown abdication of leadership.
Real lives are at stake. Tomorrow and in the coming days, millions of Americans will realize that their health care is going to go through the roof.
Republicans countered that Democrats are using Americans as pawns to force through policy changes. Representative Chuck Fleischman said, "Democrats have officially shut down our government, and hardworking taxpayers will have to pay the bill." Even with the GOP, some voices are acknowledging the risks. Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia said she's absolutely concerned about healthcare subsidies for her constituents, but argued that there was time to fix the issue before the end of the year without shutting the government down. For Democrats, this is a high-stakes gamble. Their base is presuming them to stand firm against Trump and the Republican agenda. But if the shutdown drags on, public patience may wane thin and blame game could turn against them. For Republicans, the risk is being seen as obstructionists who can't govern effectively, even with the control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. So where do we go from here? The Senate is expected to vote again on the same two failed bills. But unless one side shifts, those votes are unlikely to produce a different result. Shutdowns end when public pressure becomes too great for politicians to ignore. The last one ended after widespread airport delays forced lawmakers to act. This time, it could be unpaid troops, struggling families, or economic ripples that tip the balance. The key question is, who blinks first? History shows most shutdowns last just a few days, but with both sides dug in, this one could stretch on. And the longer it does, the more painful it becomes for millions of Americans. One of Congress's most basic jobs is to fund the government. Right now, both parties have failed to do that. The American people are left watching as services grind to a halt, workers go without pay, and families brace for uncertainty. The shutdown may end in a few days, or it may drag on for weeks. But the truth is, every day it continues is a day that millions of Americans pay the price for Washington's gridlock.